now. And I'm so grateful that you guys are here and that you could come and talk about, and talk about these technique stuff, technique talks. So
I'm still here.
Yeah, well, what I'm hoping to achieve with these workshops is I took this class with a gentleman named Chase Bossart, and he teaches pranayama. And he's an old student of Desikachar, which is a gentleman's named Krishnamacharya, his son. And he's one of the older yoga teachers who kind of brought our Ashtanga practice into life, kind of stoked it into life. And when he teaches pranayama, he says, when you give the breath sound, it becomes tangible. And when I think about the muscles in the body, as we understand them in Western science, when we can start to kind of pick and feel where the muscles are and what they are, and understand how they take shape in the body based on our lifestyle and different things that we do, then they become tangible. Whereas before that, there's maybe sensation or awareness, but the actual tangibility of what's going on in the shape of what's going on in the body, it's unclear. So by creating a deeper awareness around anatomical factoids, if you will, the body becomes more tangible and this really beautiful focus of meditation. So I always hesitate to teach anatomy because I love it and I can get pretty nerdy about it. And yoga is like, there's a technique to our system. There's a method, right? And then if we get too focused on anatomy, then it becomes something else. But for the purpose of creating this tangible feeling of energy pathways in the body based on the way that we see the musculature and feel it, I think there's something to that is inherently yogic. So before we start, I wanted to do a little bit of chanting real quick. So we're going to do Asatoma, call and response. There's Sam. Cool. Perfect. Right on time for Asatoma. Hey, Sam.
Hey, Melissa. Oh, this lighting is terrible. All right.
It's okay. We're gonna chant and then get started. So
Okay.
yeah, we'll do call and response. Okay. Asatoma, Asatoma, Sadgamaya, Sadgamaya, Asatoma,
Asatoma,
Jyotirgamaya, Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma, Mrityorma. That's a tough one. Amritam Gamaya.
Amritam
Gamaya. Very good. And then Om Shanti Shanti together. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Okay, very good. So I want to start talking about the shoulder joint by starting with fascial tissue. So fascial tissue and connective tissue. So if you can imagine an arborist is doing a anatomical dissection of a tree. And you would have the layout of the tree, and then it's, you know, specific rings chopped up and given labels and names, and the different like bark versus the inner workings of the tree, etc. But if you've ever seen a tree that's been severed, the whole thing is one lump, right? Even though it has these individual labeled parts. So that's kind of the way that the body works, is it's all one lump connected together with individual parts that we've labeled and kind of picked apart from dissection and that sort of thing over a period of time. And the thing that holds everything together in the human body is called connective tissue or fascial tissue. And it's this stuff that regenerates overnight every day. So when we get up in the morning, we have kind of like this really soft kind of, has anyone ever seen sprouts when they start to mold? That's kind of what connective tissue overnight looks like. It's like a fuzzy thing. It's fuzzy. They call it in, you know, cadaver nerds call it the fuzz. It's like a fuzz lining. So when you get up in the morning and you do your first like, you know how it feels good? I don't know, for me it feels a little bit better at night, but that's because we get up very early. But that's that connective tissue, that fuzz breaking up, right? So over time, if you don't do these, you know, stretches in different places, the fuzz becomes less like fuzz and more like if you touch the tip of your nose. We do this when a woman's laboring, right? Like this is first stage labor. It becomes a little bit more like that, and then like this, and then like this in terms of density. So when we're up and we're doing the Surya Namaskars, Ashtanga yoga the system is based on this idea of samadhi. Samadhi in Sanskrit means complete and total absorption. So the basis of our method is to become absorbed in the practice, to be able to focus really intentionally in the method, on the asanas, on the technique. Beyond that, the benefits are really cool too. Beyond just being able to build that level of concentration, it's being able to continue in the physical body this sense of movement and flow and circulation from the time we start practicing until, you know, we're 110 years old and, you know, still doing cool asanas. I've seen a couple of like old school yogi women doing like Padmasana in their 90s. It's just wild. I can only, you know, hope that I don't have to give the asanas back before then, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes. I'll do my best. So with the shoulder joint and all of that considered, we use the shoulder joint a lot in Ashtanga yoga. No system is perfect. I think if I were to rewrite the system, I might be a little less shoulder heavy, because what I see a lot in old school practitioners, especially ones like myself who do a lot of headstands, is this, right? Because we're so much in Chaturanga, so much in Chaturanga. So I think a way to kind of, you know, I've thought a lot about it, and the way to still continue to do these asanas with a sense of awareness and still get the really cool benefits out of the practice, it really helps to understand how the tissues in the body have shaped to create the humanoid shape. So the muscles and the tissues are layered, right? And they kind of cross hatch and weave in and out of each other. And you can think of it as like, you know, this would be the superficial layer, or like layer number one. And then there's a layer and another layer and another layer until you get to the bony structure. So if we're talking specifically about the shoulder girdle, right, I'm going to pull up a picture here. This is my first time using Zoom and sharing images, and I'm so excited about it. So let's just give a round of applause for technology here. Yay! Round of applause. Okay, so first muscle, I know, woohoo. Can you guys see this okay?
Mhm.
Okay, cool. So the first muscle system that we're gonna look at is the trapezius. So if you've ever thought of the traps, a lot of people think of like, oh, my traps are tight, right? So we'll start palpating there because I think that's the most familiar part of the trapezius muscles. But you can feel they connect right into the spine. And then if you kind of move down your neck, right, they go down and over the shoulder blade, or not over the shoulder blade, but kind of like with the clavicle. And then they connect into the shoulder, it's called the acromion process, right? So here, this is where all of your muscles in your shoulder joint are gonna connect. They're gonna connect right here. And then if you go down your back a little bit more, you can find the mid trap, right? I can feel my shoulder blade a little bit. And that connects into your back. And then this is where it gets weird. It might be helpful if you have a partner that you can kind of feel their trap on. I'm sure they won't mind if you massage them a little bit. Usually people don't mind if you're like, let me rub your muscles. Oh, you know, darn on that one. So with the trap, this is going to be the first kind of layer of the muscle fibers in the body. And you can see, I really like this diagram because you can see the actual fibers and how the energy of this muscle kind of has evolved in the human body to kind of like wrap into the shoulder. So it makes sense that, you know, we would be using this a lot in our practices and in our life because it is a honker muscle and it connects all the way through the spine. So if you think of any sort of, you know, twisting movements, right, where we're like this, that's trap, right? What other asanas can you guys think of that might, you know, stretch or move the trap?
When you're doing the sitting asana, where you're doing this twisting and going like this, you're really using this entire muscle, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else? Anyone else? An asana that you really feel this trap muscle working?
Stand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Cool.
How about shoulder stand? Did you say shoulder stand already?
No. And yes, actually, Pascal, definitely in shoulder stand.
Because
So
I can feel mine in shoulder stand. I'm just saying.
yeah. So let's say, for example, you know, there's a tightness in this muscle for whatever reason. Shoulder stand is an extreme flexion. So this movement of the cervical spine, so this would be the neck, right? The neck spine here. It's an extreme flexion of that muscle. So in shoulder stand, if there's any malposition or extreme tightness in shoulder stand, or maybe someone's healing a cervical injury, you want to be super careful with that pose. Maybe even just opting for legs up the wall until the body softens up a little bit to be able to do that movement. Other folks, you know, especially those folks who are hypermobile, just come with a really mobile body. Asanas like shoulder stand, you know, they're pretty accessible. It's the ones that are like the forward folding ones and that sort of thing that can be a little tricky, right? Okay, so how do we get out? Ha, okay. Yay, we're doing
Easy.
it, Peter, we're doing it.
Yeah. Nice and
Cool.
intuitive.
Yeah,
Well
right?
done, Zoom. Thank you, Zoom,
Yay.
for
So grateful, so grateful. Okay, so now we're gonna take a look at the second layer of the shoulder girdle. So has anyone, you guys have more than likely, I don't want to assume. Sorry guys. Eloise thinks we're under siege. Eloise, enough. You're embarrassing yourself.
false alarm, Eloise. False alarm.
I know, false alarm. So here is this is the front body now. I'm sorry, it's not the front body, it's the back body. So now we're gonna look at the rotator cuff muscles in these two parts, right? So we have the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus, the teres minor, and the subscapularis. So if you wanna go in, you kind of gotta go into your armpit here. So if you take a nice hunk, like I'm kind of grabbing into my armpit, can you feel how there's like a bulbous tendony thing there? That's your pec, right? So that's the superficial muscle. And then underneath the pec, you have your rotator cuff muscles that all insert into that same-ish area of the acromion process ish, but you know, like they're all kind of connecting in the same point. And you can feel the difference between the tendons. They kind of feel almost like wires, right? You can kind of feel the difference between the tendons and the bulbous nature of the muscle, right? Yeah. So the tendons in the rotator cuff muscle, they're actually quite thin. And they're very intricate. Like if you go from thinking about the way that bulky muscle on the back body took shape in the human body, right? The trap, as opposed to these smaller muscles and they're like little tendons that kind of connect here. It's a little bit more delicate, but for a reason, right? Because we're meant to have, you know, this full range of motion in the shoulder joint. Any questions about that? Okay, cool. Moving on. All right, so next we're going to take a look at the rhomboids. Have you guys ever heard of the rhomboids? Yeah? Okay, cool.
Are they shaped like a rhombus?
You have to tell me because I'm not sure what the shape of a rhombus is.
I teach geometry, so that's why I'm thinking,
Okay.
I think I have heard of the rhomboids. Yeah.
I love it.
Let's see. Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's a rhomboid. Perfect. So if you think about this, so this picture is super cool, right? You can see this person is palpating the rhomboid, but they have to go kind of underneath the shoulder blade. That's where the rhomboid lives. And it attaches.
I think that person is doing Supta Karmasana. I think that's what they're.
What was, yeah, right?
Picture.
You didn't bind, sir. Bad adjustment. So yeah, this is the rhomboid here, which also is this area we use quite a bit in Ashtanga yoga. We use it a lot in Ashtanga yoga, and it does become quite developed and very strong. It's hard to feel. You might have to palpate on a friend. I have very tiny shoulder blades. I don't know why, but at any rate, if I get behind and underneath my armpit, I can kind of feel where I would get to my rhomboid. So you might be able to do that. If anything, you might be able to feel a little bit more bulky, kind of
You
bulbous.
feel it like just on the other side, like this? Like on the other side?
Yeah. I don't have the flexibility to quite get there. Oh,
Talking about this? Like right here? Or is it here?
yeah. You know, actually, Pascal, where you're feeling there, you're feeling the trap. So rhomboid lives underneath there.
Underneath there?
Yeah, it's another layer of muscle.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you have that first muscle that we saw early on that's huge, and then underneath it, you have this rhomboid?
Yep. Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
cool.
Yep. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So this also attaches into the spine, right? And it's right at the thoracic spine, so mid-back spine. And then the other muscles that I want to focus on today are the levator scapula. So these are muscles that connect into the cervical spine. I think a lot about these muscles because I think they take the brunt of a lot of our day. These little tiny guys, right? And they take a lot of brunt in the asana practice too. What I find myself doing is like, if I'm getting ready for Trikonasana, I have to really focus on like, instead of keeping the head down, right? Do you guys ever do that in practice? I see you do it sometimes. It's okay. But it's, you know, you're inside and you're in your practice, but the head is down, right? So the move would be to keep the neck up and try and soften out those spaces, right? And keep the shoulder blades down and on the back. If there's a retraction or a shortening of those muscles, the vertebra and the base of the skull are a little
Atlas?
bit, what was that?
Atlas?
Yes, they're a little bit affected, right? Any questions so far? Okay, cool. We're gonna move on here. So this is where it gets really interesting. Doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doo. So cool. So we've got then the insertion points of these muscles, right? And they're all like up in the neck and up in here, right? So if we're working in the asana practice, right, to find the mobility to do this or this, right? There's so much, it's called Parshvayo Drishti. There's so much of this, right? Look up, look over to the side. And it's all working those insertion points of the muscles here. And the insertion points will often take the brunt of the poses, right? So go ahead and just casually move your neck side to side. And if you want, start to take free breathing with sound. Actually, go ahead and take free breathing with sound. And just notice if there's any pinching, or maybe there's lots of movement and it feels really good. Just begin to notice those insertion points. Okay, and now as you're moving your head side to side, what I want you to do now is take and move your armpits down towards your hips and think about your trap muscle, that big bad boy in the back, and imagine your spine was sucking it in. So the trap is kind of sucking itself in towards itself, while the right and the left side are coming towards one another. Keep taking free breathing with sound and keep moving the trap in towards the center line of the body on the right side and on the left side with the shoulder blades down and away from the ears. Good. And think about the subscap and the rhomboids now, pulling the rhomboids in, going one layer deeper as you move the neck side to side. Keep taking free breathing with sound. And then begin to think about the insertion point of the muscles in the shoulder itself. The tip of the shoulder, we call that the acromion process, but where all those tendons kind of connect together inside of the armpit. And think about your pecs and maybe broaden that space as you keep moving the trap right and left side in. Do that a few more times. And then go ahead and release that out. You can roll your shoulder blades up and down a little bit. Yeah. Woo. I would love to hear how that felt for you guys. Let's start with a more general question. Were you able to feel some of the insertion points in your neck when you started moving side to side? Any pinching? Sorry?
No, I was nodding, but I felt it for sure.
Cool.
I think I felt this before. I mean, in practice, you're just like, but it's
Yeah.
like I've been there. I mean, I haven't thought about it that way. Usually, it's like, oh, this is too early for this. But yeah, I think definitely like Trikonasana. I think that's like the first time you really encounter it in the morning.
Yeah.
Like, oh.
Yeah, when you do Trikonasana B, I think when you're pushing, with a hand, and that definitely for me is like, oh. It's like, hello.
Yeah. And when you started to integrate the trap muscle, right, to make that connection of bringing it together on the back, did you notice a softening of those trigger points at all? And when you brought the shoulders down? No. Okay. Okay, that's fair. So let's try something different. We're going to do that same side to side movement with the neck. Except this time what I want you to do is bring the front body in. So let your ribs come in and the back body draw together as well, and see what happens in that side to side movement. So go ahead and drop in, take free breathing with sound. And start to move the neck side to side. Shoulders down and away from the ears. Good. Drop the chin, pull it back into the neck. Yeah, lengthen the back of the neck. Good. Pulling the ribs in. One more. Good. And then let that go. Was there any difference with the front body integration?
I felt a little bit less tension. I always really like to pay attention to the way that the right and left side feel different. And so I was more aware of the differences between how the right and left side felt without incorporating the front body. But after incorporating the front body, it felt just more relaxed.
Cool. Anything else?
Mine feels like concrete, so that's okay.
So
it does move. It's better than it used to be, as you know, but it just like sometimes I'm just like, I'm like, this would be nice if it were like a little less tight.
Right. So the idea of the, the shoulder joint having its full range of mobility is kind of learning to understand how the positioning of the body in the asana in particular is going to create a stability in the joint where you're not pulling on those insertion points or just isolating the movement in specific areas. So in downward facing dog, I think this is the best asana to demonstrate because we do it a lot. So in downward facing dog, you have a couple ways to go into it, right? My favorite way, especially if it's early in the morning, right, is I'll do one of these where I'm here, can see my back body, right? I'm here, and then I'll do this. Right? It's like, oh, it feels so good. But can you see what's happening in my shoulders and in my shoulder joint? And up here too, right? It gets a little crunchy. So.
Melissa, I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
When you say shoulders away from your ears, I get that. I never know what that. I'm always like, which way? Where? I just always get confused. It's like,
yeah. So that's a great question. So shoulders away from the ears. The move would be. Let me get this down here. Right. So in something like downward facing dog, the move would be in. Can you guys see me okay? Okay, good.
yeah.
So instead of here, right?
Oh, yeah.
Right. And what that does is it brings it into those bigger muscles, right? The rhomboids, the traps, and it's not so much on those tinier neck muscles. In the morning, shoulders away from the ears as the body's warming up might require, instead of like, wanting to get the hamstrings long right away, it might require having to bend the knees and the elbows just a little bit to let the joints warm up. And then maybe getting into that straight-legged position.
I always assumed that shoulders away from the ears meant down, but it seems like it's also can mean like out. Right? Oh, I never really, I just assumed that our shoulders go in more than one direction, but I just was like, oh, they feel best when they're down, but they also, to access those other muscles, that makes a lot of sense.
Right. And when you think about another really good cue, if you can practice it and get into it, it took me a while to understand. Angela calls it armpit bandha. Is there actually, I have to actually look it up in my books and see what they teach about it. But it's when you get into the asana and you hollow your armpit. right? So if I can create a hollowing in my armpit, hold on. Yeah, I'm really properly accessing and stabilizing all of those muscles. If there isn't a hollowing in my armpit, I don't know, it still looks pretty hollow. It's the light. It's making a shadow. I swear my armpit's not hollow right now. But like, if I'm not making a hollowing in my armpit, right? What I'm doing is I'm causing a little bit of tension and pulling up here, right? So we want those muscles to be expanded, right? And on the back. It's really the same as like if I wanted to come up into a really stable version of Pincha Mayurasana, right? Shoulders away from the ears, armpits are hollow. Inhale up. Right? That same shape is the same shape that you're making and practicing here. I wouldn't be able to do that stably if I was here, right? So the shoulder integration and why I wanted to start with this joint complex. It's okay.
Also, they think something's going on too. Sorry.
Eloise is like, her eyes just open, but she's just trusting. So the thing with this too is it kind of pulls the ribs out. Like this becomes unstable, right? And again, like it's a total legal move. You know, if you're up early, you want to move your body freely, you want to do a couple of like before getting into it, whatever, you know, have a party. It's a good time. But then like getting back into that nice shoulder stability. Another thing that happens, Mila led me onto this, is tech neck, right? So like being hunched over, that's, you can see in my body, right? Like those muscles are very thoroughly developed. I've worked very hard for them, right? So the way to kind of get those back would be in the asanas, that same move to pull and lock the shoulder girdle. Oof. Yeah, my shoulder blades need a little work. But anyways, to pull and lock the shoulder girdle down and back, ribs in.
So Melissa, when I'm doing downward facing dog, the only way I have found that works for me to get the, you know, when you say shoulders, for me is like my trap are just like
Yeah.
that, like, right? So the way that I found to do that is to move my shoulder blades down. Does that make sense?
It totally does. It's called, so the shoulder blades have elevation and
Yeah.
right? So if you're depressing the shoulder blade, you're releasing the trap by engaging the rhomboid. Well, you're releasing the upper trap by engaging the rhomboid. And another muscle, I was going to talk about her, and then I was like, we'll save it for another day. But we use the latissimus dorsi. Have you guys heard of this one? She lives right about here in the back.
Yeah.
And she's the one who kind of pulls everything down. We use the lats a lot.
So your wings.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what we call them in weightlifting. So that's their wings.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. Okay.
So when you're using the lats, I think one of the cool things to think about is like, okay, well, the lats are pulling down, the armpits are coming down, my chin is back. And then if the belly's in, this whole thing with free breathing with sound, it gets really strong and stable, but it's also got a lot of energy and fluidity moving through it because we've been doing vinyasa, because we've been taking free breathing with sound, because we've been moving, right? And we're in the pose 5 to 8 breaths, and then we're moving on. So keeping it moving, keeping it fluid, keeping everything going. Any questions? Any more questions? That was a good one, Pascal.
I think that when I jumping through to sit also accesses the pushing out. Is that right? I feel like that's the time where I very consciously I'm pushing my shoulders out. Is that?
Yeah, upper back is rounding a lot.
Mhm.
And then there's also an engagement and a rounding in this part of the belly. This part of the belly is pulling back and in. So this whole thing is rounding, and the knees are into the chest. It's this movement, right? This is why I torture you guys here and then here, right? So yeah, when you're jumping through, this whole thing is rounding. Angela calls it an air crunch. I like it. I think it works. But yeah, so speaking specifically about the shoulder joint, right? If I'm gonna jump back or jump forward, I don't want my elbows to be out. I don't want this to happen, right? This can get it stuck. I want everything to be down and rounded in. Did you guys see the difference in that motion? So not here, here, right? Up. Great question. I want to focus specifically on the shoulder joint, but there's a lot more there too, in terms of like that shape that we're making when we're jumping through in the shoulders. And that's also the work of the chin forward as well, right? So here, armpit bunda, arms are straight, well, buoyancy. Right? We're at time.
Mhm.
Any final questions before we go?
Mm-mm.
No, that was really informative. Thank you.
Yeah.
You're so welcome. Yeah.
Mhm.
This was our first Monday Techniques talk. Pascal had thrown out a really great idea for doing a breath technique talk. I have a couple more of the joint complexes lined up, but I think it might be nice to throw in a pranayama one in between. Would you guys be interested in something like that?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Would you do a pranayama breathing with? I mean, I feel like would we also do the breathing at the end or at the beginning, or I mean the actual pranayama as opposed to burning it? You know?
Yeah, sure. So the breath technique that we use in Ashtanga yoga initially is free breathing with sound. Pattabhi Jois always taught it as free breathing with sound. As I work with my senior teachers, what I'm finding is that as you start to have the practice more steadily, you can begin to integrate different breathing techniques within the practice. So free breathing with sound, in through the nose, out through the nose. Breath moves front, back, side, up, down. You're just moving the breath, moving the arms, learning the choreography, getting that deep focus concentration down. After the choreography is deep in the body on a cellular level, then you can start to flirt with like maybe Ujjayi breath. And Ujjayi breath is quickly, Elizabeth, we did a little bit of this in the beginner's workshop, right? So Ujjayi breath is inhale up, exhale from the belly. Inhale into the chest, exhale from the belly. It is insanely warming. Like I'm very pitta. Like if it's gonna go, it's gonna go to the flamethrower side. And I have to be very careful with Ujjayi breath because it can really give you a lot of fire and heat the body quite quickly. but that's what we would talk about essentially, is making the difference between free breathing with sound, ujjayi breath, and then we would do, I think you guys are ready for more breathing techniques, so we could do a couple of other ones.
Yeah, because I know like David Garrigues or whoever he I think once I might have even done a whole like pranayama class with him. It's like
Yeah.
in the right side, hold for 4 seconds, out in the left. I mean, there's like a couple of those. I think that are like the primary series of pranayama, right? I don't know.
Yeah. So Pattabhi Jois created a pranayama series, and he would teach it to practitioners, anyone that wanted to learn. David Garrigues, I think he actually wrote a book on it. He is infamous for giving out really technical information and being like, have fun. Like students, they're like, loaded with all of this really deep stuff. So if you wanted to dive into it, he's got a lot of really good literature that has some good pranayama stuff. I feel really comfortable and confident teaching like the base level of those techniques. And it really is like, it's good, powerful stuff for sure. All right, pranayama it is.
Yeah. I have a question. Is that thing in Dandasana, when you jump into Dandasana, like when I've seen some practitioners, like an old picture of I think there's an old video online of Krishnamacharya himself, like doing, anyways, they do the thing with belly. There's some kind of weird belly trick. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like,
yeah, that's called.
Is that a pranayama?
What was that?
Is it a pranayama thing or is that something else?
Yeah. So I don't know what picture you're referring to specifically, but my intuition says it's Kumbhaka,
Okay.
which is, so Kumbhaka is a deep exhalation and a lift of the pelvic floor up through the spine, where you do
Right. I was wondering if that was it.
Yeah. If you ever wanted to flirt with Kumbhaka in practice, hashtag don't tell any other Ashtanga teachers I told you about this. I think a safe place to play around are the prasaritas, especially if you feel like you're in the place in your practice where there's not much to do. You've like landed in the pose, you're in the state of the asana, you're just kind of breathing and taking nasagati drishti and getting like that concentration benefit. That could be a place where you'd play with Kumbhaka. The thing with Kumbhaka is it makes you super janky.
What does that mean?
Janky, like things get really flexible.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. So
First time I hear that word, 30 years in the States.
And I may or may not have been teaching you guys Kumbhaka secretly in Prasarita Padottanasana C, this one, right?
Yes. I think you taught me this like almost from the beginning because you knew I could do it.
And the thing when you take Kumbhaka and Prasarita Padottanasana C, what it does when you follow the exhale to the bottom and hold it just for a couple seconds, right? So it's not free breathing with sound, it's a pranayama technique. The shoulder joint and the back muscles and all the connective space there's more range of motion without having to force it down. And you can really, yeah. The thing with Kumbhaka though is if you do it in somewhere, in an asana that you need that stability to do the asana safely and execute it safely, you're in for some trouble. But we're all adults here. Practice safe Kumbhaka.
It's one of my favorite, actually. Kumbhaka, I think, is one of my favorite.
Yeah.
I don't know. It makes my stomach feel good.
I like Kumbhaka a lot too. I had a lot of adhesions in my lower back when I first started asana practice, and there's still some samskaras there that I have to work through, but following the exhale all the way to the bottom and getting comfortable being empty like that, I find is really therapeutic to move dense tissue. For students that I've taught and for my colleagues who are hypermobile, I don't have a hypermobile body. I tend towards strength, the mobility over mobility. It's not really safe for them to do kumbhaka unless they're in like a really stable asana, like, you know, like Paschimottanasana, and they're not thrusting themselves deep into their hamstrings. Then okay, it's safe for them there. So, you know, part of it too is knowing like what kind of body type do you lean towards when you're doing those extra pranayama practices inside of primary series. I can hear Angela hovering over me being like, Melissa, the point of primary series is samadhi, it's concentration. The method is enough. But I don't know. I guess I wanted to share how I practice and what's informed my practice. So, you know, do whatever feels good for you. Yeah. Cool. Anything else, you guys? No.
Nope.
Okay. Cool. This was great. Thanks for sharing your Monday night with me. And I look forward to pranayama. And then I believe our next session is on the hip joint, which will be 1 month from now. So we can kind of digest the shoulder joint stuff. Okay.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Thank you, guys.
Have a great night, you guys.
Have a
See you in
good
the
night.
AM. Bye.
Bye.